I never thought I'd be wiping buttercream frosting from my face at a family gathering. But there I was, 32 years old, staring at my sister Amber's venomous expression as cake dripped from my chin onto my favorite blue blouse. The silence in my parents' dining room was deafening. My mother's hand was still suspended in midair, her mouth agape at what she'd just done. Dad was frozen in his seat, his eyes wide with shock. My brother-in-law Mark had pulled out his phone and was recording everything, probably for my sisters. Instagram sob story later. How dare you? Amber finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with what she clearly thought was righteous indignation. After everything this family has done for you? I carefully wiped a glob of frosting from my eyebrow, my hand trembling slightly. This was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner. The monthly tradition we'd maintained, even after all of us kids, had moved out. Instead, it had turned into an ambush, with my entire family ganging up on me because I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment, the apartment I had worked myself to exhaustion for 3 years to afford. "I'm not giving you my apartment, Amber," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "I don't care how many desserts get thrown at me." My father slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "Olivia, you're being unreasonable. Your sister has 2 children and another on the way. They need the space more than you do." "That's not my problem," I replied, standing up and grabbing my purse. "I bought that apartment with my own money. I worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years straight to save for the down payment. I didn't get handouts like Amber always has." My mother gasped as if I'd slapped her. "How can you be so selfish? We've always taught you that family comes first," I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Family comes first? Is that why you took my college fund to pay for Amber's wedding? Is that why you gave her my car when she totaled hers? Is that why I've been expected to give and give while she takes and takes?" The truth was, I'd spent my entire life in Amber's shadow. 2 years younger than me, she had always been the family favorite. Prettier, more outgoing, more willing to follow our parents' prescribed life path. She'd married Mark right after college, just as our parents wanted. She'd started having babies immediately, just as our parents wanted. She'd moved into a house in the same neighborhood as them, just as they wanted. I, on the other hand, had been a disappointment from the start. I'd studied computer science instead of education like my mother had hoped. I'd focused on my career instead of finding a husband. I'd moved downtown instead of staying in the suburbs where I grew up. Every choice I made that didn't align with their expectations was met with sighs and lectures about family values and responsibilities. "You have a 3-bedroom apartment that you live in alone," Amber said, resting a hand on her slightly swollen belly. "We're bursting at the seams in our 2-bedroom house with the twins, and now with the baby coming." She trailed off, her eyes filling with calculated tears. "Then buy a bigger house," I said flatly. "You and Mark both work. You can afford it." "Not in this market," Mark interjected, finally putting his phone down. "And not in a good school district. You know how important good schools are for the twins' future." I crossed my arms. "Again, not my problem. I chose to live where I do because it's a 10-minute walk to my office. I use all 3 bedrooms. One is my bedroom, one is my home office, and one is my gym. I'm not giving up my home because you decided to have another baby without planning for where it would sleep." My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe how selfish you've become, Olivia. Is this what success has done to you? Made you forget where you came from? Made you forget the values we raised you with?" I felt a lump forming in my throat. Despite everything, their disappointment still had the power to hurt me. But I had spent too many years being the family doormat, the responsible one who was expected to sacrifice for Amber's comfort and happiness. "I haven't forgotten anything," I said quietly, "including how differently you've treated us our whole lives. I'm sorry, but my apartment is not available. Not now, not ever." That's when my mother grabbed what remained of the chocolate cake on the dining table and hurled it at me. The room fell silent again as I stood there, cake covering my face and clothes, the humiliation burning through me like acid. "If that's how you feel," my father said, his voice cold, "maybe you shouldn't come to family dinners anymore." I looked around at their faces, my mother's righteous anger, my father's disappointment, Amber's calculated victimhood, and Mark's barely concealed smirk, and something inside me broke. And then, strangely, something inside me mended at the same time. "Maybe I shouldn't," I agreed, grabbing my car keys. "Goodbye." As I drove home to my beautiful downtown apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and view of the city skyline, I felt both empty and full at the same time. Empty because I had just lost my family, at least for now. Full because for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. What I didn't realize then was that this cake-throwing incident was just the beginning. The war for my apartment and for my independence had only just begun. I spent the next morning obsessively cleaning my apartment, something I always did when stressed. By 10 a.m., my hardwood floors gleamed, every surface was dusted, and I'd reorganized my pantry by both food type and expiration date. My phone had been blowing up with texts and calls from my family, but I'd silenced it after reading the first message from my mother. "I hope you're proud of yourself for breaking your sister's heart." As I scrubbed the already spotless kitchen, counter for the third time, my doorbell rang. I froze, spray bottle in hand. No one ever came to my apartment without calling first, especially on a Monday morning. A quick check through the peephole revealed my best friend Rachel, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing her "who needs therapy when you have me" expression. "I got an SOS text from your cousin Mia," she explained as I opened the door. "Apparently, the family grapevine is buzzing with news that you've turned into some kind of heartless monster who hates children and wants your pregnant sister to be homeless." I groaned, accepting the coffee and collapsing onto my sofa. "Of course that's the version they're spreading. Did Mia mention the part where my mother threw cake at me?" Rachel's eyes widened. "She most certainly did not. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." As I recounted the previous day's disaster, Rachel's expression cycled through shock, outrage, and finally, fierce pride. "It's about damn time you stood up to them," she said when I finished. "They've been taking advantage of your guilt and good nature for years." "I know, but—" I hesitated, the doubt creeping in again. "What if I am being selfish? Amber does have the twins, and with the new baby coming—" Rachel set her coffee down with enough force to make me jump. "Olivia Marie Campbell, stop it right now. Your sister and her husband are both employed professionals. They are not destitute. They could absolutely buy a larger house if they wanted to. But why would they when they've been conditioned their entire lives to believe that Amber deserves whatever she wants, including your things?" She had a point. Amber was a pharmaceutical sales rep who made excellent money, and Mark was an attorney at a mid-sized firm. They weren't struggling financially. They just didn't want to spend their own money when mine had always been available to them via parental pressure. "Besides," Rachel continued, "this is your home. You love this apartment. You've built your life here." She was right about that too. I'd fallen in love with this apartment the moment I'd walked in 3 years ago. The real estate agent had warned me it was at the very top of my budget, but I'd been determined. Downtown properties weren't getting any cheaper, and this one had everything. The perfect location, the right layout, even a small balcony where I'd created a miniature garden. I'd worked countless overtime hours and taken on freelance coding, projects on weekends to save enough for the down payment. "I know," I sighed, "but I've never been good at standing up to them. What if they never speak to me again?" Rachel's expression softened. "Then you'll finally have some peace and quiet. Look, Liv, I know they're your family and you love them, but they don't respect you. They see you as a resource to be tapped whenever Amber needs something." My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at it reflexively. A text from my father. "Your mother is devastated. Call her and apologize." I showed it. to Rachel, who rolled her eyes. Notice how it's always about how your mother feels or how Amber feels. When was the last time any of them asked how you feel? I couldn't remember. That realization hit me like a physical blow. I need to get some air, I said suddenly, standing up. Want to walk with me to the park? Rachel nodded, understanding my need to escape the confines of the apartment that had suddenly become both my sanctuary and the center of family controversy. As we walked the 3 blocks to the small urban park I frequented, I couldn't help noticing all the little details of my neighborhood that I loved. The local coffee shop where the baristas knew my order, the bookstore with the elderly owner who always had a recommendation ready, the community garden where I'd spent peaceful Saturday mornings. This was my home, my community, not just an asset to be handed over on demand. We found an empty bench and sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching dogs play in the designated area while their owners chatted nearby. You know what bothers me the most? I said finally. It's the assumption. They didn't ask if I would consider selling my apartment and giving them a family discount, or if I could help them find a place in their price range. They just announced that the obvious solution to their problem was for me to give up my home. Because that's how they see you, Rachel replied. As an extension of Amber, not as your own person with your own needs and desires. A memory surfaced. From my childhood. I was 12 and I'd saved up my allowance for months to buy a beautiful art set with professional colored pencils. I'd barely used it for 2 days when Amber decided she wanted to try drawing. My parents made me give it to her, promising they'd buy me another one. They never did, and Amber lost interest after a week, leaving the expensive pencils scattered and broken. It's always been this way, I murmured. I just never had anything valuable enough to fight for before. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. Well, you're fighting now, and I'm proud of you. My phone rang, and my stomach clenched when I saw it was Amber. After a moment's hesitation, I answered and put it on speaker so Rachel could hear. Olivia. Amber's voice was teary. I need you to understand how much this means to our family. The twins will be starting school next year, and the district where your apartment is located has the highest test scores in the city, I frowned. My apartment isn't zoned for the suburbs, Amber. We know that, she sniffled. We've already talked to a real estate agent. If we sold our house and you gave us your apartment, we could convert it into a suitable family home. We'd need to do some renovations, of course. Your home office and gym would become the kids' rooms, and wait, I interrupted, incredulous. You've already talked to a real estate agent and planned renovations for my apartment? The apartment that I own and have never once indicated I was willing to give up? Rachel was making furious cutting motions across her throat, silently urging me to hang up. Don't be dramatic, Liv, Amber said, her voice taking on the condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. We all know you'll do the right thing eventually. You always do. Mom and Dad are just upset that you're dragging this out and making it so difficult. A cold clarity washed over me. Amber, listen carefully. I am not giving you my apartment. Not now, not ever. I don't care what Mom and Dad say or what you think I always do. This is my home, and it's not up for discussion. You're being ridiculous, she snapped, the tears vanishing from her voice. What do you even need all that space for? It's just you. You don't have a husband. You don't have children. I have a life, Amber. My life. And it doesn't revolve around you or your needs. Mom was right, she hissed. Success has made you selfish and cold. The sister I grew up with would never... The sister you grew up with was conditioned to put your wants above her needs, I cut in. That sister is gone. I suggest you start looking at houses in your price range instead of my apartment. I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking slightly. Rachel was looking at me with a mixture of awe and concern. You okay? I took a deep breath. Actually, I think I am. For the first time in a long time. We sat in silence for another moment before Rachel spoke again. You know they won't give up easily, right? This isn't over. I nodded, watching a golden retriever chase a ball across the park. I know, but neither will I. What I didn't realize then was just how ugly things would get before they got better. The next week passed in a strange limbo. I threw myself into work, grateful for the complex coding problems that required all my concentration and left no mental space for family drama. My team was developing a new data analytics platform with an impossible deadline, which meant long hours and working lunches, the perfect distraction. By Friday, I had almost convinced myself that the worst was over. Maybe my family had accepted my decision and moved on. Maybe they were already looking at houses in the suburbs that would suit Amber's growing family. I should have known better. I arrived home late that evening to find my parents' car parked in the visitor spot of my building's garage. My stomach immediately knotted. They had never visited my apartment before, not when I first bought it, not for any of the small dinner parties I'd hosted, not even when I'd invited them for my birthday last year. Sure enough, they were waiting in the lobby, my mother clutching her designer handbag with white knuckles, my father checking his watch impatiently. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too tired for pleasantries. "We need to talk, Olivia," my father said, his business negotiation voice in full effect. "Somewhere private." I considered refusing, telling them to leave, but the lobby had other residents coming and going. The last thing I needed was to create a scene that would have my neighbors gossiping. "Fine, come up." The elevator ride to the 12th floor was silent and tense. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, assessing and judging as always. Once inside my apartment, my parents made a show of looking around, taking in the open floor plan, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furnishings I'd carefully selected piece by piece. "Well," my mother said finally, "I can see why you've become so attached to material things. This is quite impressive." Coming from her, it wasn't a compliment. "Why are you here?" I asked again, not offering them a seat or a drink. My father cleared his throat. "We've come with a proposal, a compromise." I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." "We know you've worked hard for this place," he began, his tone reasonable. "And we respect that you feel entitled to the fruits of your labor." The careful phrasing made my jaw clench, but I stayed silent. "So, we're prepared to offer you compensation," he continued. "Your mother and I will buy out your apartment for what you paid for it 3 years ago. You can use that money as a down payment on something smaller, perhaps in a different neighborhood. That way, everyone wins." I stared at him, wondering if he was serious. "Do you have any idea what this apartment is worth now compared to what I paid for it 3 years ago?" He waved a dismissive hand. "The housing market fluctuates all the time. Besides, this isn't a commercial transaction. This is family helping family." "No," I said simply. "That's not a compromise. That's you trying to help Amber get my apartment at a steep discount." My mother stepped forward. "Olivia, be reasonable. Amber needs—" "I don't care what Amber needs," I finally snapped. "This is my home. I'm not selling it to you. I'm not giving it away. I'm not moving out. End of discussion." My father's expression hardened. "Is this about money? Is that why you're being so difficult?" "Because if it is—" "It's not about money," I interrupted. "It's about the fact that my entire life I've been expected to give up what I have for Amber. Well, not anymore. Not my apartment." My mother's face crumpled. "I don't even recognize you anymore. What happened to the sweet girl who always thought of others first?" "She grew up," I said quietly. "She realized that thinking of others first in this family only ever meant thinking of Amber first. And she's done with it." My father's face flushed red. "Now you listen here, young lady. Your sister has given this family grandchildren. She's carrying on the family name and values. What have you contributed? A successful career? A fancy apartment? Those things don't matter in the long run. Family is what matters." Each word was like a knife, but I stood my ground. If family is what matters, then why are my contributions worth less than Amber's? Why is my happiness less important? Why is my home disposable while hers is sacred? Because you're being selfish, my mother burst out. Because Amber has children to think about. Children she chose to have, I pointed out. Just like I chose my career and my home. Why are her choices more valid than mine? My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. There's something else you should know, my father said after a moment. Something that might help you understand the gravity of the situation. I waited, bracing myself. Mark's been offered a partnership at his firm, he said. It's a prestigious position, but it would require them to be in this neighborhood to maintain the right connections. The right address matters in his field. I almost laughed. So this isn't even about the school district or space for the kids. It's about status. It's about opportunity, my mother corrected. Something we've always tried to provide for both our daughters. Funny how Amber's opportunities always seem to require my sacrifices, I observed. My father's patience was clearly wearing thin. We didn't want it to come to this, but you leave us no choice. Your grandfather's trust fund. What about it? I asked, suddenly alert. My grandfather had left both Amber and me modest trust funds when he died, accessible when we turned 35 or bought our first homes, whichever came first. I'd used mine for the down payment on this apartment. There was a condition in the will that your mother and I, as trustees, could redirect the funds if we deemed it necessary for the family's well-being, he said. We're prepared to challenge your use of those funds if you continue to be unreasonable. The threat hit me like a physical blow. You would retroactively try to take away my trust fund? After 3 years, that's not even legally possible. Our attorney thinks differently, my mother said with a sniff. I walked to my front door and held it open. Get out. Olivia. Get out now or I'm calling building security. They left, but not before my mother paused in the doorway. We're trying to help you, Olivia. Someday you'll be alone and regret pushing away the only people who truly care about you. After they left, I sank to the floor, my back against the closed door, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for tonight's confrontation, but for a lifetime of being made to feel less than, of having my achievements dismissed, of being expected to sacrifice while Amber was encouraged to take. When the tears subsided, I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. Rachel, I need a lawyer, a good one, specializing in trust fund law. My parents just threatened to try to retroactively take back my inheritance. The war had officially escalated, and I needed to prepare for battle. I spent the weekend in a state of anxious productivity, alternating between cleaning my already spotless apartment and researching trust fund laws online. By Sunday evening, I'd worked myself into such a state that I almost called in sick on Monday. But avoiding work wasn't going to solve my problems, and hiding in my apartment would only make me feel like I was conceding ground in a territory battle. So Monday morning found me at my desk, attempting to focus on code while waiting for a call, back from the lawyer Rachel had recommended. The distraction of work was helpful, but every time my phone vibrated, my heart raced, half expecting another threat from my parents or a tearful manipulation attempt from Amber. Around noon, my team lead stopped by my desk. Hey, Olivia, there's someone asking for you at reception. Says she's your sister? My stomach dropped. Thanks, I'll handle it. I found Amber waiting in the lobby, one hand resting on her slightly more pronounced baby bump, the other holding a shopping bag from an expensive baby boutique. She'd clearly dressed for the occasion in a flattering maternity dress that somehow made her look both professionally polished and vulnerably pregnant. What are you doing at my workplace? I asked quietly, conscious of the receptionist pretending not to listen. I thought we could have lunch, she said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sister time, just the two of us, like we used to. We had never had sister time lunches, ever. But I recognized the strategy. Amber was switching tactics, going from confrontation to false nostalgia and sisterly bonding. I have a working lunch today, I lied. Team project with a deadline. Her smile faltered slightly. Oh, well, maybe I could join. I'd love to meet your coworkers. The last thing I needed was Amber charming my colleagues with tales of her pregnancy struggles and subtle hints about her unreasonable sister who wouldn't help with her housing situation. That wouldn't be appropriate, I said firmly. You should have called before coming here. I tried, she said, her voice taking on a wounded note. You haven't been answering my calls, because every call had been a variation of, give me your apartment, for the past week and a half. I took a deep breath. Amber, I'm at work. I can't do this right now. Do what? Have lunch with your sister? Her voice rose slightly, drawing attention from people passing through the lobby. I'm just trying to reconnect with you, Olivia. Why? Are you being like this? I recognized the performance for what it was, a carefully orchestrated scene designed to make me look unreasonable in public. If I refused her innocent lunch invitation, I was the cold-hearted sister rejecting a pregnant woman. If I agreed, I'd be subjected to an hour of emotional manipulation. Fine, I conceded, checking my watch. I can spare 30 minutes. There's a cafe across the street. The cafe was crowded with the lunch rush, which was perfect, public. Enough that Amber wouldn't create a scene, but noisy enough that our conversation wouldn't be overheard. So, she said, once we were seated with our salads, I've been thinking about our situation. There is no our situation, I replied calmly. There's just you wanting something that belongs to me, and me saying no. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, then quickly composed herself. Olivia, I know we've had our differences over the years, and maybe you feel like Mom and Dad have favored me. The understatement was so enormous I nearly choked on my water. But we're family, she continued. And family means being there for each other when it counts. Right now, I really need your help. The twins are growing so fast, and with the baby coming, she patted her stomach for emphasis. Amber, I said, keeping my voice level, let me be absolutely clear. I sympathize with your housing needs, but my apartment is not the solution. You and Mark need to find a home that you can afford. But we've already talked to a real estate agent about your building, she persisted. The location is perfect for us. The commute to Mark's firm would be so convenient, and there's a wonderful private preschool just 2 blocks away. I set down my fork. Did you not hear what I just said? My apartment is not available. She leaned forward, dropping her voice. What if we paid you a little over what you paid for it? Dad mentioned that was an issue for you. The issue isn't the price, Amber. The issue is that I don't want to sell my home at any price. Her expression hardened momentarily before she forced it back into a pleading smile. What about a temporary arrangement then? You could stay with Mom and Dad for a year while we get settled. By then, maybe Mark's partnership will allow us to look for something even better. The audacity was breathtaking. No! Why are you being so difficult? She hissed, the pretense of sisterly bonding evaporating. It's just bricks and mortar. You can buy another apartment anywhere. So can you, I pointed out. Why does it have to be mine? Because yours is perfect for us, she exclaimed, loud enough that a few nearby diners glanced our way. Lowering her voice again, she added, and because you're in a position to help family, but you're choosing not to. Do you know how that makes you look? I don't care how it makes me look, I said truthfully. What I care about is finally establishing boundaries after a lifetime of having mine trampled whenever it was convenient for you. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached into her shopping bag and pulled out a small stuffed bear. I got this for the baby yesterday. I was going to ask you to be his godmother. The transparent manipulation made me feel suddenly very tired. No, you weren't. You were going to dangle that possibility as an incentive for me to give you what you want, just like you've done with every honor you've bestowed on me since your wedding, where I was demoted from maid of honor to bridesmaid 2 weeks before. Because your new friend needed the confidence boost. Her mouth fell open in genuine surprise. She hadn't expected me to call out her tactics so directly. I need to get back to work, I said, standing up and leaving enough cash on the table to cover both our meals. Please don't come to my office again. This isn't over, Olivia, she called, after me, loud enough for others to hear. Family should come first. I thought you'd understand that by now. I didn't look back as I walked out of the cafe, but I could feel the curious stares of the other patrons burning into my back. Amber had achieved her goal of making me look like the bad guy in public, but I found that I didn't care as much as I would have a few weeks ago. When I returned to the office, I had a voicemail from the lawyer Rachel had recommended. She could see me that evening. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could get ahead of whatever legal threat my parents were planning. What I didn't expect was for the situation to explode on social media before I even made it to my legal appointment. By the time I left work that evening, Amber had posted a tearful video on Instagram that had already been shared hundreds of times within our extended family and social circle. In it, she sat in what looked like a child's bedroom, one of the twins, presumably, with toys visibly crammed into every corner. I'm sorry to share something so personal, she began, her voice catching, but sometimes when you're hurt and desperate, you need your community. My sister, she paused for dramatic effect. My own sister has a huge apartment in the city that she lives in all alone, 3 bedrooms just for her. Meanwhile, my husband and I are struggling to find space for our growing family. She turned the camera to show a crib wedged alongside a twin bed. This is where my 4-year-olds sleep now, and with the baby coming, we just don't know what we're going to do. We've asked Olivia to consider swapping homes with us. We'd even compensate her, but she refuses to even discuss it. Another strategic pause. I guess some people just don't understand what family means once they achieve a certain level of success. The comments were exactly what she'd been hoping for. I can't believe someone would be so selfish toward their own pregnant sister. Family should always come first. What kind of person needs 3 bedrooms just for themselves? Your poor children deserve better. And on it went. People I'd known my entire life, distant relatives I only saw at holidays. Even a few former classmates who had connected with Amber on social media over the years, all piling on to condemn my apparent selfishness. I was still scrolling through the comments in horrified fascination when I arrived at the lawyer's office. Barbara Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for handling complex trust fund disputes. Her office was elegant but not ostentatious, with framed degrees and professional awards tastefully displayed on the walls. So, she said after I'd explained the situation, including the latest social media development, your parents are threatening to retroactively challenge your use of trust fund money that was released to you 3 years ago when you purchased your apartment. Yes, I confirmed. They claim there was a condition in my grandfather's will that allowed them, as trustees, to redirect the funds if necessary for the family's well-being. Barbara made a skeptical noise. I'd need to see the exact language in the will, but that sounds highly unusual. Most trust fund conditions are very specific about when and how the funds can be accessed, not open-ended provisions that can be invoked years later. My grandfather was very traditional, I explained. He valued family cohesion above all else. It's possible he included something that could be interpreted that way. She nodded thoughtfully. Do you have a copy of the will or the trust documents? No, I admitted. I never thought I needed one. When I turned 30 and wanted to buy my apartment, my parents simply told me my trust fund was available and the money was transferred to my account. Interesting, Barbara murmured, making notes. So you never actually saw any legal documentation? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. No, I trusted them. And the amount you received matched what you expected? I hesitated. I was told the trust fund contained $100,000 for each grandchild. That's what I received. Barbara looked up from her notepad. Did your sister also receive $100,000? I don't know, I realized. I assumed so, but we never discussed it. Here's what we're going to do, Barbara said decisively. First, I'm going to request a copy of your grandfather's will and the trust documentation from the appropriate county records. If your parents were the executors, they would have had to file the will with the probate court when your grandfather passed away. She continued outlining her strategy, including preparations for a potential legal challenge from my parents and advice on how to handle the social media situation. Ignore it completely. By the time I left her office, I felt marginally better. At least I had a plan and someone knowledgeable in my corner. What I didn't have was any idea of just how ugly things would get over the next few days, or the shocking revelation that was waiting for me at the end of it all. The social media storm unleashed by Amber's video continued to grow. By Wednesday, she had posted a follow-up, this time with my mother joining her, both of them wearing matching expressions of wounded disappointment. We've always taught our girls that family supports each other, my mother said, dabbing at non-existent tears. I just don't understand where we went wrong with Olivia. The comment section was even worse than before, with people I considered friends expressing their shock at my selfishness and distant relatives I barely knew sharing stories about times when their own siblings had made sacrifices for them. Was tempted to post my own video in response, to tell my side of the story. How Amber had been given everything her entire life at my expense, how my parents had consistently favored her, how this apartment was the one thing I had achieved, entirely on my own and refused to give up. But Barbara had been clear. Engaging would only escalate the situation and potentially give my parents ammunition if they did pursue legal action. So I remained silent publicly, while privately I seethed and hurt and questioned myself. Was I really being unreasonable? Was an apartment worth fracturing my family over? Then I would remember the expression on my mother's face as she threw cake at me, or my father's dismissal of my entire life's work as insignificant compared to Amber's procreation, and my resolve would strengthen again. On Thursday, Barbara called with surprising news. I've obtained a copy of your grandfather's will and trust documents, she said without preamble, and there are some irregularities I think you should be aware of. My heart rate accelerated. What kind of irregularities? First, there was no provision allowing your parents to redirect funds based on family well-being or anything similar. The conditions for distribution were very straightforward. Each grandchild was to receive their portion of the trust upon reaching age 35 or purchasing their first home, whichever came first. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. So they lied about being able to take back my trust money. Yes, but that's not all, Barbara continued. According to the trust documents, your grandfather left equal shares to each of his 4 grandchildren. The total trust was valued at $800,000 at the time of his death, meaning each grandchild's share should have been $200,000, not $100,000. The implications took a moment to sink in. Are you saying I should have received twice what I got? That's exactly what I'm saying, Barbara confirmed. And there's more. The trust was established with specific investment parameters, even accounting for the 2008 financial crisis. Conservative estimates suggest your share should have grown to approximately $250,000 by the time you accessed it 3 years ago. I felt as if the floor were tilting beneath me. They kept more than half of my inheritance from me. It appears that way, Barbara said gravely. I'll need to do more digging to confirm what happened to those funds, but given what you've told me about your family dynamics. She didn't need to finish the thought. We both knew where that money had likely gone. There's one more thing you should know, she added after a pause. According to the documents, you and your sister weren't the only beneficiaries of the trust. Your grandfather also included his other 2 grandchildren. Your cousins, I presume? Yes, my Aunt Janet's kids, Tyler and Megan. Have they purchased homes or turned 35 yet? I thought about it. Tyler bought a starter house about 5 years ago, and Megan is renting in Chicago as far as I know. She's 32, I think. So Tyler should have received his portion of the trust when He bought his house, Barbara mused. It might be worth reaching out to him discreetly to find out if he received the full amount he was entitled to. The suggestion made me uncomfortable. My cousins and I weren't close, largely because my parents had discouraged those relationships over the years, claiming that Aunt Janet had slighted them somehow before I was even born. I'll think about it, I promised, though I had no idea how to even begin such a conversation. After hanging up with Barbara, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this new information. Not only had my parents lied about their ability to take back my trust fund money, but they had actively stolen from me, and possibly from my cousins as well. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. I'd always known my parents favored Amber, but to actually steal from me? That was a level of dysfunction I hadn't been prepared for. I was still trying to wrap my head around it all when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Olivia. It's Megan, Aunt Janet's daughter. I know we haven't talked in years, but I saw Amber's posts and wanted to reach out. There's some family history you might not be aware of. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment, a strange feeling of foreboding settling over me. Whatever Megan wanted to tell me, I suspected it would change everything, again. I arranged to meet Megan at a quiet cafe far from my workplace and apartment, somewhere my family would be unlikely to spot us. As I waited nervously at a corner table, I realized I hadn't seen my cousin in nearly a decade. Our families had drifted apart over some ancient grudge that predated my birth, with only obligatory holiday cards maintaining the thinnest veneer of connection. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The awkward teenager I vaguely remembered had grown into a confident woman with a stylish bob and sharp business attire. She spotted me immediately and headed over, a tentative smile on her face. "Olivia, hi. Thanks for meeting me." She slid into the seat across from me. "It's been a long time." "Too long," I agreed, studying her face. There was a family resemblance I'd never noticed before, something in the shape of her eyes that reminded me of old photos of our grandfather. "Your text sounded important." She nodded, fidgeting with a napkin. "I've been debating whether to reach out since I saw Amber's posts. It's not really my business, but..." She hesitated. "When I saw what they were trying to do to you, it felt too familiar to ignore." "Familiar how?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Megan took a deep breath. "Do you know why our families don't really speak? The real reason, I mean." I shook my head. "My parents always said your mom had done something unforgivable, but they never specified what." A bitter smile crossed Megan's face. "That's rich, considering what really happened." She leaned forward. "The falling out happened because your parents stole from mine." The blunt statement shouldn't have shocked me after what Barbara had uncovered, but it still did. "What did they steal?" "My mom's inheritance," Megan explained. "When our grandmother died, she left her house to be sold and the proceeds split equally between your dad and my mom. Your parents were executors of the estate, and somehow the equal split turned into your mom and dad getting 70% and my mom getting 30%. I felt sick. How did they justify that? They claimed additional expenses, debt repayment, all sorts of things that mysteriously had no documentation. My mom didn't have the money to fight them legally at the time. She was a single parent with 2 young kids. Megan shrugged. So she took what she could get and cut ties. The story aligned all too well with what Barbara had discovered about my trust fund. "I'm so sorry, Megan. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," she said kindly. "You were just a kid. But here's why I'm telling you this now. When I saw Amber's posts about your apartment, it was like history repeating itself. Your parents have a pattern of taking what isn't theirs and redistributing it according to their preferences. They've always favored Amber," I admitted. "But I recently found out it goes beyond favoritism. They withheld half of my trust fund from my grandfather." Megan didn't look surprised. "Have you spoken to Tyler yet? About his portion?" "No, I wasn't. Sure how to approach it. You should, she advised. Tyler got some money when he bought his house, but it was far less than what Grandpa had indicated we'd each receive. We always wondered about the discrepancy, but without access to the original documents, a thought occurred to me. Did you ever receive anything from the trust? Barbara, my lawyer, says you should get your portion when you turn 35 or buy your first home. Megan frowned. No, nothing. Mom mentioned once that Grandpa had set up something for us, but your parents told her after he died that we'd been removed from the will because of their falling out. She looked troubled. Are you saying that wasn't true? According to the documents my lawyer found, you and Tyler were definitely included. Equal shares for all 4 grandchildren. She absorbed this information in silence, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. They lied to us. For years. They lied to all of us, I said quietly. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment before Megan spoke again. There's something else you should know about Amber's situation. It's not just about the apartment. I raised an eyebrow questioningly. Tyler works at the same hospital as Mark's sister, she explained. The gossip there is that Mark's firm isn't actually offering him a partnership. He's on thin ice because of some ethical concerns with a client last year. They're looking for a prestigious address to create the appearance of success and stability. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising given what I'd pieced together, but hearing it confirmed made me even more resolute about keeping my apartment. Thank you for telling me this, Megan, and for reaching out. She smiled warmly. Family should help family, but real help, not the manipulative kind your parents specialize in. As we finished our coffees and prepared to leave, Megan hesitated. There's one more thing that might interest you. My mom kept some of Grandpa's personal papers after he died. Letters, photos, that sort of thing. He was very organized about his finances and kept copies of important documents. If you want, I could ask her if there's anything related to the trust fund in those papers. That would be incredibly helpful, I said gratefully. We hugged goodbye, promising to stay in touch regardless of how the current situation resolved. As I watched her leave, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: anger at my parents' deception, sadness for the family connections I'd missed out on, but also a growing determination to finally stand up not just for my apartment, but for everything that had been taken from me over the years. What I didn't realize was that the final confrontation was coming sooner than I expected, and it would reveal a truth even more shocking than what I'd already learned. The following. Sunday, exactly 2 weeks after the cake-throwing incident, I received a text from my father. Family meeting at our house, 3 p.m. today. Your presence is required. We have a solution to this situation. I forwarded the message to Barbara, who advised caution. Don't go alone. Bring a witness, record everything if legal in your state, and don't sign anything. I called Rachel, who immediately volunteered to accompany me. No way am I letting you face those vultures by yourself, she declared. As we pulled up to my parents' suburban home that afternoon, I noticed Amber's car already in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar vehicle. Whose car is that? Rachel asked, nodding toward the black sedan. I have no idea, I admitted, a knot forming in my stomach. Maybe they brought in reinforcements. The tension in the living room was palpable when we entered. My parents sat stiffly on their floral sofa while Amber and Mark occupied the love seat. In the armchair by the fireplace sat an elderly man in an expensive suit, a leather portfolio on his lap. Who's your friend? My father asked coldly, eyeing Rachel. This is Rachel, I replied simply. She's here for support. This is a family matter, my mother objected. Then Rachel is family, I countered, sitting down and gesturing for Rachel to take the chair beside me. Who's your friend? I nodded toward the elderly man. This is Mr. Harrington, our attorney, my father explained. He's here to help us resolve this unfortunate situation. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. I understand there's a dispute regarding property and inheritance matters. That's one way of putting it, I said dryly. My father leaned forward. Olivia, we've been patient with your rebellion, but it's time to be reasonable. Mr. Harrington has prepared documents that will resolve everything neatly. The attorney opened his portfolio and extracted several papers. We've prepared a property transfer agreement. In exchange for your cooperation, your parents are prepared to compensate you with a sum of $150,000, 50% more than your original investment in the apartment. I almost laughed. My apartment is worth at least twice what I paid for it 3 years ago. And that's assuming I wanted to sell, which I don't. The emotional value to your sister and her growing family far outweighs any market considerations, my mother interjected. And what about the trust fund money you stole from me? I asked bluntly. Does this generous offer include returning the additional $150,000 that should have been mine? The room went deadly silent. My parents exchanged alarmed glances while Amber looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? My father finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. I've seen the trust documents, Dad. I know Grandpa left each of his 4 grandchildren equal shares of $200,000, not the $100,000 you gave me. I also know about the investment parameters that should have grown my portion to about $250,000 by the time I accessed it. Mr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking between me and my parents with new interest. That's ridiculous, my father blustered. The market crashed in 2008. The trust lost value. Not that much value, I countered. And it had plenty of time to recover before I bought my apartment in 2022. My mother's face had gone pale. Who have you been talking to? I have my own attorney now, I informed them. She's been quite helpful in uncovering the truth. She's also very interested in what happened to Tyler and Megan's portions of the trust. At the mention of my cousins, Amber's eyes widened. What do Tyler and Megan have to do with this? She asked, looking at our parents. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I studied Amber's face closely, realizing with a shock that she genuinely seemed confused. You don't know, do you? I asked her softly. Know what? She demanded, looking between me and our parents. Amber, this isn't the time, my mother began, but I cut her off. Our grandfather left equal trust funds for all 4 of his grandchildren, I explained. Each of us was supposed to receive $200,000 upon turning 35 or buying a first home. I only got $100,000 for my apartment. Tyler got less than he was entitled to for his house, and apparently Megan was told she wasn't included in the trust at all. Amber turned to our parents, confusion evident on her face. Is this true? My father's expression had hardened into something ugly. You've always been too gullible, Olivia, believing whatever story makes you feel like a victim. It's not a story, I said evenly. It's documented fact. The trust documents are public record. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat again. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. It seems there are additional matters to discuss that weren't disclosed to me beforehand. There's nothing to reschedule, I told him. I'm not signing any property transfer agreement. I'm not giving up my apartment, and I'm certainly not accepting a generous offer of $150,000 when my parents owe me at least that much from my trust fund alone. What about the money for Tyler and Megan? Amber asked, still looking confused. If what Olivia is saying is true, where did their portions go? Our mother stood up abruptly. Amber, this doesn't concern you. Olivia is trying to distract from her selfishness by making wild accusations. They're not wild accusations, Rachel spoke up for the first time. I was with Olivia when her lawyer called with the trust details. Everything she's saying is documented. And who asked you? My father snapped at her. Rachel met his gaze coolly. No one. But I've watched for years as you've favored one daughter over the other, as you've manipulated Olivia into giving up everything from her college fund to her car to make Amber's life easier. I'm not staying silent anymore. Amber looked stricken. Is that true? Did they take Olivia's college fund for my wedding? The fact that she didn't know, that she'd been just as kept in the dark as I had been, albeit in a very different way, was a revelation. I'd always assumed she was complicit in our parents' favoritism, but perhaps she'd simply benefited from it without understanding the cost to me. Yes, I confirmed, and my car when you crashed yours, and countless other things over the years. I never asked for that, she said quietly. I never would have agreed to it if I'd known. Of course you would have, our mother said dismissively. You've always been an Amber first, just like everyone should be. Your needs come first. That's how it works in a family. The blatant admission of preferential treatment left me momentarily speechless. It was one thing to suspect my parents favored Amber, another entirely to hear them state it so plainly. No, that's not how it works. In a healthy family, I finally managed. In a healthy family, everyone's needs are considered equally important. What happened to Tyler and Megan's trust money? Amber pressed, ignoring our mother's attempt to dismiss the question. Our parents exchanged another glance, and something passed between them, a silent communication born of decades of marriage. It was redistributed where it would do the most good, my father finally said, his tone defensive. Janet made her choice when she sided against us years ago. Her children didn't deserve equal treatment. And my missing $150,000? I asked. Where? Was that redistributed to? My mother's chin lifted defiantly. That money helped secure Amber and Mark's future, the down payment on their house, the twins' preschool tuition, investments in what matters. The casual admission that they'd stolen my inheritance to give to Amber hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made me feel sick. To my surprise, Amber looked equally horrified. You stole from Olivia to give to me? How could you do that? It wasn't stealing, my father insisted. It was prioritizing, making sure the family resources went where they would have the most impact. By what measure? I asked bitterly. Because Amber married and had children on your preferred schedule? Because she chose the career path you wanted for her? Because she stayed in the same neighborhood instead of building her own life? Yes, my mother exclaimed. Exactly that. She understood what family means. She respected our values. She earned the support. The room fell silent again as the full implications of those words sank in. They'd never loved me less than Amber. They'd simply required me to earn their love through compliance while giving it to her freely. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. Mr. Harrington, you should know that my attorney will be in touch regarding the misappropriation of trust funds. You might want to consider whether you wish to continue representing my parents once you've reviewed the full documentation. The elderly lawyer looked distinctly uncomfortable. I'll need to examine all relevant materials before proceeding further, he agreed, closing his portfolio without having presented any documents for signature. My father's face flushed with anger. You ungrateful, vindictive girl, after everything we've done for you, you mean after everything you've taken from me, I corrected him. And yes, I do intend to hold you accountable, not just for the trust fund money, but for a lifetime of making me feel less valuable than my sister. To my complete shock, Amber stood up too. I think I need some time to process this, she said, her voice unsteady. Mark, we're leaving. As she brushed past me toward the door, she paused. Olivia, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The genuine remorse in her eyes was unexpected and disarming. After they left, my mother turned to me, her expression a mixture of fury and calculation. If you pursue this, you'll destroy this family. Is that what you want? I didn't destroy anything, I replied calmly. You did that when you decided one daughter deserved more than the other, when you stole from me and my cousins, when you threw cake at me for refusing to give up my home. You'll regret this, my father warned. When you're alone with your precious apartment and your cold career success, you'll regret choosing possessions over family. I looked at him, really looked, and saw for the first time how small he seemed, how petty and controlling. I'm not choosing possessions over family, I told him. I'm choosing self-respect over manipulation. I'm choosing truth over comfortable lies. And I'm not alone. I have people in my life who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Rachel, and I left without another word, the weight of decades lifting from my shoulders with each step. In the car, she squeezed my hand. You were magnificent in there. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I said finally. Sad, but lighter. The following week was a whirlwind of legal consultations and emotional processing. Barbara was confident we could recover the misappropriated trust funds, not just for me, but for Tyler and Megan as well, who had both eagerly joined the case after I reached out to them with the evidence. Amber, to my continued surprise, had called to apologize again, this time in a longer, more heartfelt conversation where she admitted she'd been blind to our parents' manipulation of both of us. They trained me to take and you to give, she said, her voice thick with remorse. And I never questioned it because it benefited me. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I'm sorry too, I told her honestly. Sorry that I resented you instead of seeing that we were both being used in different ways. About the apartment, she began hesitantly. I'm not giving you my apartment, Amber, I said firmly, the old defensiveness rising automatically. I know, she said quickly. I was going to say we found a house in our price range in a good school district. It needs some work, but it's actually bigger than your apartment would have been. Mark and I are putting in an offer today. The relief I felt was palpable. That's great news. I'm happy for you. There was an awkward pause before she spoke again. Do you think we could try to build a real relationship? As sisters, without our parents' influence? The question caught me off guard. After a lifetime of complicated feelings toward Amber, the possibility of a genuine sisterhood was both appealing and terrifying. I'd like to try, I said cautiously. It won't be easy undoing a lifetime of patterns. I know, she agreed. But I think it's worth trying, for both of us. A month later, I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. My apartment, my home, felt different now. Not because anything physical had changed, but because it now represented something more than just a place to live. It represented my stand for self-respect, my refusal to continue old patterns of sacrifice and resentment. The legal battle with my parents was ongoing, but Barbara was optimistic about the outcome. Tyler, Megan, and I had formed a united front, supporting each other through the process and building the family connections we should have had all along. My relationship with Amber was cautiously improving. We were meeting weekly for coffee, carefully navigating decades of conditioning and finding our way towards something healthier. She'd apologized for the social media posts and publicly clarified that I had every right to keep my home, which had gone a long way toward repairing my reputation among our extended family and friends. As for my parents, I hadn't spoken to them since that final confrontation. Their attempts to contact me had ranged from angry accusations to tearful pleas, but I'd maintained my boundaries. Perhaps someday we might find a way forward, but only if they could acknowledge the damage they'd done and commit to change. Rachel joined me on the balcony, handing me a glass of wine. Penny for your thoughts? I smiled. I was just thinking about how much has changed in a month, how much I've changed. For the better, she observed, clinking her glass against mine. Definitely. For the better, I agreed. I always thought standing up for myself would cost me my family, and in some ways it did. But it also gave me a chance at better relationships and showed me who really deserves a place in my life. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the city in twilight. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The war for my apartment was over, and I had won. But the real victory wasn't keeping my home. It was finding my voice, setting boundaries, and discovering my own worth. I had wiped the cake from my face and done something none of them expected. I had refused to be diminished any longer. And in that refusal, I had finally found freedom.